Today is Sunday, October what? 15th. There it is right on my screen.
And leaves on the ground.
And right, the leaves are turning, and contrary to popular opinion, it has not started snowing in Buffalo yet. A couple of years back, we did have a surprise October snowstorm on, I think it was the 16th of October. So it could happen tomorrow. And with that in mind, we probably should, worry about, get all the things off our chest in case, it does turn into a snowmageddon and we never see each other ever again. Tim, you just showed us a second ago a really cool Spectrum. And so I'm going to spotlight you, and you can tell us the story.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is it. It's a Spectrum 2 Plus 128K. Apparently there were two models, one gray, the more common, and one black, the less common. This is the gray one. So basically, a guy I know in England needed to get a Swatch watch for his girlfriend. She wanted the one only available in San Francisco. So I went over there and pick it up. The fun story of this was I get over there, I called them, hey, it's available. Yes, it's available, because it wasn't showing as available online. So I go over there on a Saturday. I get there and I turn the corner to the entrance to the store, and there's 300 people in line. And I'm like, what's going on here? Apparently it was a release for some other watch. So my wife and I go out, have some lunch, come back, and now it's down to only 150 people. So I came back the next Tuesday and picked up, I go the next Tuesday, there's no one there.
Yeah.
Like 3 people in the store. So I got the watch and sent it off to him. And in return, instead of just paying me, I said, well, just go ahead and send me a Sinclair model that I don't have. So that's what I got. And it's actually pretty hefty. It's got some weight to it.
Yeah, but it might be like those, Beats headphones where they just put a slab of metal in it to give it weight.
I don't know. It does have some weight. Well, it's got probably the motor for the cassette recorder. It's got some weight to it too. And it's got a decent feeling regular keyboard. It's not the QL keyboard. It's more standard, I guess. I don't think you can hear it.
No.
Got a slight tinniness to it.
Well, I'm willing to bet it's a membrane.
The weight of it, it's the heat sink. It's inside.
Oh, really?
Remember, that is 128K made by Amstrad. It's basically the same original as Sinclair, more stable electronically, but it's the same.
Yeah, it's definitely made by Amstrad after they bought, and so it has probably more of an Amstrad feel than anything else. So.
And what about? I've seen these online, and I've wondered about the buttons for the tape player, because they look like keyboard buttons, right?
Actually, interesting is instead of being let me show you. Let's see if you can see it. So these go up and down, right?
Yes.
These go at an angle.
Oh, hey.
Just discovered that. There's
just like a cassette player.
Yeah. Sort of. It's been
it is a cassette player.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I had this 4-track cassette player a long time ago, and the buttons did the same sort of slantiness. And actually, those little shoebox cassette players would do the same.
Right, but the buttons are at the edge, not in the middle.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have to. There is a red record button, but do you really need it? I guess you do. I remember the VIC-20, you put the cassette in the thing, and the VIC-20 would control everything. Whether you don't have to push play, to record, it handled everything. I don't know if this does.
That is a basic. It's a basic tape recorder. The Spectrum does not control it.
Okay, so you got to hit record. That was the biggest thing for me on the ZX81 was the cassette player I had. You had to push play, record at the same time. If you just push play, it would sort of record, but not loud enough.
Mhm.
So that took me the longest time to figure out why isn't this why isn't this saving and loading? So play record. Wow, read the manual.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
none of the
same. It's the same in that unit. You have to press record and play for it to record, save a program. It's
yeah
just not.
none of the Spectrum or the Timex stuff had a remote lead, right? A lot of the computers had a remote lead, which would go into the cassette, and that would actually pause and make the motor go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
we
actually
didn't
have
have
one of
that.
those too there, Tim. So that's kind of cool that you have. I'd like to get a +3, that has the disk drive in it, but haven't really been able to find one of those. But
Well, if the guy in England needs something else from me locally, that's been my source.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, cool. Cool. So Tim, you remember you sent me a CD a long time ago of things like the International QL
IQLR, right?
IQLR. Yes, thank you. And I'm pretty sure I put those up on archive. And Paul sent me a box, I don't know, in the last week or two that contained a bunch of print copies of the IQLR. I'm betting your wife doesn't want you cluttering up the house anymore, right?
Yeah. Actually, so I've got someone locally. You might be picking up some of my old hardware. He might take some of my old newsletters since they're now all digitized and on the internet, in an archive. So
Yeah.
but now I'm not interested in having. I got enough. I think I have most of the hard copies because I was one of the early subscribers to IQLR.
Yeah. How long did that last? A bunch of
4
years, right?
years.
Okay.
There were 4 years worth, and then it lasted until Bob Dill had a heart attack and
Oh,
had
yeah.
to really slow down, and he shut down. But unfortunately, he shut down. Paul probably remembers this. Owing people, he took money for ads for the next whatever season or series or whatever, and then he just stopped. Never paid him. So QL Today came out of that. A lot of the people that were advertising in IQLR started QL Today.
Oh, okay. Okay. And Paul, you have a new background.
Well,
What
yeah.
do
I'm good. I'm gonna close my door.
So Paul, that's that famous it's a
Portable 1000.
1050 is the model number for the case.
yep,
The Timex made
Yep.
these rotomodal cases, and that looks like a TI keyboard that somebody shoehorned into it.
Something like
Yep.
that.
Yeah, very cool.
Very crudely done, though.
Is this the one that you talked about seeing at some shows or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I've seen another one which has I feel
More
like it has
color
an-
on the key tops.
yeah, I feel like it has an Auric keyboard in it because it looked like, if I recall correctly, it was black with some red keys. So yeah, clearly a popular mod to make back in the day. Very cool.
Well, not real popular because there weren't very many cases.
They're among the people who bought the case, right? Who wanted to
Yep.
turn it into their computer.
Yep.
I did that mod. I was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem was is when I soldered the wire changes that you had to do. I guess I held it too long, and a few of the keys would stick because it had gotten too hot.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being, 13 and having difficulty with soldering as well.
You learn a lot more scavenging parts by unsoldering.
Yeah.
I was a pro by 13. Come on now. Maybe when I was 9, I was that might have been. My parents didn't want me to have a soldering iron because I'd burn the house down or something.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's when you get a wood burner kit.
And how many folks grabbed the wrong end of the soldering iron?
Maybe once.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't remember ever doing that, but it could have happened.
I think I can still see the scar on my hand from that.
You learn to respect the hot end very quickly.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
I think it was more I couldn't afford a high quality soldering iron than actually me doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Eric, did you have the, the Radio Shack special that was like $5 or something?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were unequivocally terrible. So Eric, you are new to it. I think this is maybe the first time you've joined us.
No, I've been a couple times.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All
I live
right.
in Utah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. You might be the first person I can remember who's in Utah. What was
From
your
Ohio though.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
when you were burning your fingers, you were living in Ohio?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you become a Timex Sinclair person?
So when I was like 13, someone gave me a TS-1000.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's interesting is years later, when I was like 16, they had become old by then, and they weren't really being sold in the stores anymore. And people had them just thrown in their closets. And so I got 2 more of them from people who just said, "Oh, you can have it." Yeah. And so I started programming on the 1000. And then when I found out about the 2068, of course I really wanted it because it had sound, color, and it was just so fun. The programming language was expanded.
Yeah. Cool.
So I got one for Christmas when I don't remember the exact age. Maybe 14 or 15. I got a 2068. My father, I basically had to tell him what it was, how to buy it, where to order one from. But yeah, he got me one for Christmas.
That's cool. And I'm assuming you use the tape drive there
I
for
did, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a few cartridges too, and the tape drive just drove me nuts though.
Mhm.
So as I got older, in high school, I wrote like 3 programs, games for it, although they were still written in BASIC because I didn't know how to do assembly language at the time,
Mhm.
or even a C compiler or anything. And I saved those on tape, but it was painful. And so I'd go to reload it, and it would say load error. But what's interesting is I still have the cassette somewhere with these saved, and I know nowadays you can use audio editing software and everything and get the programs back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I may do that someday. I just haven't gotten to it. And then so after that, I started using a Commodore 64 with a disk drive because it was just a lot more reliable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't afford micro drives, and then I heard that those weren't even the greatest either at the time. People had problems with those.
Well, we didn't Timex didn't release any micro drives for the 2068.
Third
If
parties
you
did, I think.
There was a
Stringy floppy, a Wafa drive, and
yeah.
some of the
Yeah,
other
that
ones.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, they were sort of like the micro drive, but definitely AJ,
A&J
AJ,
and
yeah,
Rotronics.
Yep,
yeah,
I
they
had all those catalogs, and as a teenager working at Little Caesars, wishing I could buy all this stuff.
Cool. Very cool, Eric. Hey Jay, are you new or have you joined us before?
I'm new to your event and everything.
Cool.
Like I did put in the chat just a little bit ago, this tape recorder. It's I can't remember. Yeah, it does have some batteries in it, AA batteries, or is it AAA? Hold on just a minute. I think it's AAA batteries. But when I was a young kid, 15-ish or so, when I had my ZX Sinclair 81, I would save everything to a cassette with like a Panasonic and plugged into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have this, I'm kind of thinking that was the AC home that was messing up the signal and making it maybe not great, right? But this is DC. It works so great every single time. It's awesome.
Very cool. There's a, I mean, depending upon how dedicated you are to, you know, the 81/1000, there's two devices that are, you know, good storage solutions, and one is called the ZX Band Plus, which is right now they're like 100 pounds or something. I just got an email that there's a little batch released, and those are on sellmyretro.com. Those are really cool because they have the AY sound chip built in them. They have an SD card slot. They have, is it 32 or 64K I think it's 64K of RAM, and you can, you know, map some of that RAM into that special 8K, from the 8K to 16K memory portion, so it'll do high res graphics, and it's sort of like the be all end all of solutions for the 81. And then there's also, at sort of the lower end of the scale, there's a thing called a Wespi, which is probably pronounced as a Vespi, and it uses the ESP32. Is it the 32, Joe? Okay. It uses this tiny little cool microcontroller that has Wi-Fi on it, and what it does is it plugs into your tape jacks, and you can also connect one of the lines to the video, and it acts as a little you know, file save and load thing. And the first time that you turn it on and activate it, my understanding is that it downloads like a fast load routine, so the loading and saving is faster than normal. The caveat, which Joe figured out, is that you have to switch your 81 or 1000 to 50 hertz for it to work, because it's designed by a bunch of guys in, you know, Europe, where they all have 50 hertz machines. And the code's all written in, what, I don't know, probably C or something, and so, you know, the timing is tight. But the cool thing that it also does is it has a little VGA port on it, so you can hook up a little LCD monitor to your 81. Yeah.
So I don't have an 81 anymore. I have a Sinclair ZX20, the same one that you have, basically,
Oh,
or
the
maybe
2068?
this one has
Okay.
2068. You know, this is
Yeah, awesome.
beautiful one here. I had the ZX81 for 2 or 3 years. I did some assembly on it. And then when I got this one, I actually ordered the manual for it, you know, where it had the assembly for the 64 character screen and everything.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
tech
I
manual.
typed that in, and I think I solved like 1 or 2 lines of code that was not really right. And then I started on a little word processor, and I never really got too far other than like automatic word wrap and stuff. But I mean, I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Awesome. And so, you know, is that your original 2068, or did you?
Oh no, I had to buy that off of eBay. Yeah, I think the other one, I don't know, probably went in the garbage a long time ago or something. But I started feeling this, like, you know, desire to hit some of this older computer stuff, and yeah, so I ended up buying that, and then I didn't use it for a while, but then I finally broke it out and wrote some programs on it, mostly from like 80, was it 84 basic games, and then 101 basic games and stuff.
Oh yeah, okay.
David
David
All.
All? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was
Cool.
fun.
So are you loading and saving to tape primarily?
Yes, because now I don't know. Do you guys like have like disk drives, or you do use like
Yep.
micro cards and stuff, or what are you guys using?
Well, so there's unfortunately Willie's not here today. Willie Jones is a big fan of this disk drive system that a guy named John Oliger made, and it used a little expansion bus that plugged into the back of the 2068, and there were two cards, one which had the disk drive controller card on it, and the other one had the operating system, as it were. And Willie recently cloned those things, and he's got a bunch, and he's working towards being able to to sell them to other folks. And what we're what I'm trying to help Willie with regard to that is getting it to work with a GoTech device. I don't know if you know what a GoTech is. It's this USB. I wish I had mine handy. I don't even know where it is. It's the size of a
3.5 inch,
5.25 inch.
3.5.
Oh, it's the 3.5 size.
It's a 3.5, right?
Okay, so and it's a replacement for old disk drives, right? And it it uses the standard floppy drive connector. So in theory, it should work. It's just a matter of getting the right format. And so you can stick a USB thumb drive into it. That's what it has, the GoTech.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. But Willie, Willie's got like, it's really funny when he's on, you can see behind him, he's got like, 2 or 3 2068 systems, one of which is loaded with disk drives, hooked up to his thing. So that's one solution. There was a guy named Larkin who made a disk drive system, and he got out a long time ago, and I don't think that anybody has really worked on sort of cloning that. There was Airco, and Keith, who's on today, he has an Airco system. There was a system from Timex in Portugal called the FDD3 or FDD 3000, and it used 3-inch discs, and you had to flip them over. It would only record on one side, but you could flip the disc over. And that +3 that Carl mentioned, that uses 3-inch discs, right?
I think so. I think the +3. I think it uses those same discs.
Okay. And there
does
are
use the same discs,
okay.
like those.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're kind of funky looking. They're not your standard 3.5 inch, Sony diskettes like everybody uses. Yeah, they're special.
David,
Yeah.
this is Gustavo. Hello, hello, the group. I remember 5 years ago, approx, I tested one of those drive made by China, and the problem is mainly problem in the original version of the firmware is does not support double density or not support 256 bytes per sector. I don't know is was solved or not, because those floppies was created original by replacement the IBM PC hardware of floppy. I don't know if now exists double density and different sector size.
All sorts of craziness those things support. Samplers, music instruments, like synthesizers, industrial hardware. Yeah, it's really expanded. And since Gustavo spoke up, the last thing that is going to be available soon is a card that will plug into the back of your 2068. And it uses a Raspberry Pi Pico to let you save and load to an SD card. And Gustavo is one of the folks who's been working on that. There's 2 guys, Gustavo and Ricardo, in Argentina, who did the vast majority of the work on this. Jeff who's in Minnesota, Jeff, or Wisconsin? Minnesota.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, you have to drive through Wisconsin to get there.
Sorry.
That-
Jeff,
that
who's in Minnesota,
raspberry-
and apparently Wisconsin is a terrible place, has been involved. Jeff did the circuit board design and a lot of hardware debugging, and that thing should be available November-ish. Next, what is this? It's October, next month.
I
And
might
that-
add that there was a survey conducted by one of the publications that was national at the time,
Yeah,
and about 50% of the disk users were using the JLO system,
yeah.
the ones that responded.
Right, right. And the numbers of folks who responded, it was something like a total of 700 folks who had disk systems.
Wow.
And multiple people had more than one disk system. Like the numbers added up to more than, and the guy who wrote that, published that newsletter, noted that there were folks who had JLO, and I can't remember what the other one was.
I
That
think Larkin was a little bit more popular.
was the overlap. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you might want to, I know you guys are mentioning about the Pico, the Raspberry Pi Pico.
Mhm.
Has anybody thought about making, I don't really know if it would be a popular thing, but like in the cartridge slot where you would have an SD card inside this cartridge.
Mhm.
And that way you could save and load stuff, from an SD card from this thing that was just plugged into your cartridge port.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That would be so. The biggest challenge there is just real estate. But there is this device that I can't remember the name of the company that makes it, but it's called a CH376, and it's basically a little microcontroller that has a USB-A plug on it, and then on the other side there's, I don't know, 8 or 9 signal lines available, and that would be a good candidate for a cartridge slot solution, because it has a lot of smarts on it, and you can just talk to it with these, it has a little command set of its own. And the Mattel Aquarius guys used that to make a little cartridge solution, Carl. So yeah,
Well, I
there's
know I actually have that, the MX. Well, I have the MX, the Aquarius MX, which is it plugs into where the cartridge slot is,
yeah,
and it's got the AY chip in there, so it gives you the full, I think, 4-channel sound
okay,
instead of the single channel that's built into the Aquarius. And it doesn't have cartridge ports on it, obviously, because everything's stored inside flash. Right,
Yeah.
It's got a 512K flash chip inside there that you can load all the cartridges on, and it's got a GUI. When it boots up, it's got a GUI so that you can pick what cartridge you want to play.
okay,
But it's called the Aquarius MX, and I've got some of the boards. I haven't built one up yet. I actually got some boards that had a problem on it, and I had to write the guy that made the board and says, "Hey man, this is shorted out here the way he had it on this layout." So he had to make a revision on the layout so that it wouldn't short that line out. But anyway, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
is it, let me just share my screen, and you can tell me if we're talking about the same thing. Is it this thing?
No.
Okay,
That's Bruce Abbott's original one. This is kind of a further development of that.
okay,
But if you look at Aquarius MX, that's what it's called.
all right.
And I can't remember the guy that it's been a couple of months, but Yeah, I don't know if
Oh,
there's got to be
yeah.
pictures. Yeah, there's got to be pictures in there, and I've got the case. You know, I had some cases made for it.
Oh,
There
look
it
at
is.
that.
Yeah, I
Wow.
had some cases made for it, and you know, I think I got about 5 boards, 5 or 10 boards. But it's
Interesting.
yeah, but anyway, I know what you're talking about. But I was just saying, you know, there's also a couple other things to save. You know, there's obviously the bit, the oh god dang it, what's their
Yeah.
names? Evie's bite back
Like, yes.
cartridge, not
But
cartridge, but it,
that's a load only solution.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't think you can save to it, but you can load a bunch of, you know, tape files onto the SD card that you put into it, and that way you can load stuff into the 26.8. The nice thing with the bite back is it can work on a bunch of different retro machines, right? Not just It's not just a Timex. It can work on the ZX81. It can work on the 2068. It can work on the Spectrum, but it can also work on, you know, Atari machines, the Commodores.
That's right. All you have to do is buy that little interface piece.
Right, you have to buy the interface piece. The cartridge itself, the bite back is, you know, just got I think it's a 40 pin IDC connector on it, right? And then you plug that into whatever adapter that adapts it to the cartridge, generally the cartridge port or the expansion port on the Timex's case. You know, that way you can load. You know, you can use it with multiple retro machines if you've got those, obviously, right? And then there's also the SVI CAS, right, which I've talked about
Oh,
before,
yeah.
which is also used with multiple retro machines, but it's basically a digital cassette deck, and it's got adapters that you can buy from the guy. Some guy in Australia makes it, and it's not too expensive. I think I paid $70 for it or something like that. But it's got an LCD screen on it, and you can load that one. You can save. You can save to it.
Okay.
And load from it. So, and it's got the remote line. So, you know, if you hook it up to a machine that uses that, you know, it'll pause and start the cassette tape. I know it's a digital one, but it knows to stop and to start and to all that kind of thing. And you know, he's made adapters so he can. I guess it was originally made for the SVI machines, right? That's why it's called the SVI CAS. But so he's got these cables that are made up to plug into the, you know, a lot of these machines had proprietary DIN connectors or whatever for their cassette ports, right? Just like I think what's his name was talking about. Tim was talking about the Commodore, like the VIC 20, their cassette, their data set or whatever they called it. It plugged into a edge card, right, and it would control it. And so, you know, he's made a bunch of different connectors so that you can just plug it directly into the machine and it acts as a digital tape, but it stores everything on an SD card, right? It converts everything to an SD card. So that way you can use it with a, you know, 2068. You could use it with a lot of machines, you know, tons of the retro machines, anything that probably used a cassette deck back in the day.
Yeah.
So when it saves it, does it still go as slow as
Yeah, it's
feeding the
not
audio? Yeah.
right. It loads it as slow and it saves it as slow. Unless there's maybe a fast load thing in that program, right? That you're loading.
Right.
So there was Fast Load 2000, I believe. There was a fast loader for the 2068.
Yeah. Well, the 2060 is not terribly slow at save and load. I mean, you know, compared to the 1000.
Well, it really zips on the JLO.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, I do appreciate folks, you know, using the floppy drive systems, but you know, in the modern day, I don't think a lot of people, not too many people want to go down that route. I mean, you know, the purists obviously, you know, want to have those systems, and I, you know, like I said, I totally appreciate that. But I think anybody trying to do it modern wise would want to put it on a USB stick or a flop or a SD card, right? I think
yeah,
that's how
they're
they
more
kind of want to load.
acclimated to the tech.
Yep, and plus it's fast. I know the bite back. I mean, it loads instantly. You know, a program. So, but anyway, there's a ton of different options for, at least loading programs. I don't know that you would want to save programs as much unless it's something of your own. And then even if that is the case, you could probably save it onto a tape and then get a tape to, like a Wave to, what are one of those programs, David? Basically, it takes the program and digitizes it, right? So it's in a digital format, like a Wave format or something like that. So you can play it back on, like your phone. You could hook your headphone jack up to your phone and play it through. I know
Or
Adam
like
does that quite a bit.
this will turn things into a micro SD card. Just you put the tape in, you play it, and it just records it onto a micro SD card.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I found that. I thought that was pretty cool. I'll put in the chat like basically what it is.
Cool.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
interesting.
just
Haven't
set
seen
up
that.
my iPhone to do it. Actually save a program and then load it back in again. I was able to save before, but using an LM386 audio amplifier, just like you suggested, David, that did the trick. I had to set it for a gain of 50, and that bumped up the output signal coming out of the iPhone's ear jack high enough to where the TS1000 could actually read it back. So today was the first day where I got that circuit working. And so I wrote a program, saved it to my iPhone as an audio file, just using the voice recorder, and then played it back and loaded it back into the TS1000 after running new on it and flushing memory, right? And it worked. It worked flawlessly.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, so basically, like I was saying, once you get it into that format, right, that you could play it back on, like
It's
on an
just an audio
iPhone or
file.
something.
Yeah.
Right,
Just-
right. You can
Just
put
like
it
you're storing it
on.
on a tape, you're just not using tape.
Right, you can put it on some of these things that use SD cards because that's how they store they're just storing it on an SD card. So even though you may not be able to record, save things on some of these products, you still could at least get your file onto it, right? If you use these other methods to digitize it, and then you could put it onto the SD card, right? The
But
SVI CAS is really unique because, like I said, you can actually record to it. It will, take the audio straight from whatever computer because it knows a bunch of computers. He's already got not presets, but he knows the data formats of all these machines that he has programmed into the SVI CAS. So when you're playing it back, you basically tell it what machine you're working on, and it knows what to expect as far as its, the audio that it's going to be getting from the machine.
But the time you are using to save and load is the original time for the machine, or you load faster?
No, it's its original time because it's just using the mic and ear jacks. Just like I said, it's basically a digital cassette recorder, right? That stores everything on SD cards.
Okay, that's very simple. No, the interface that David mentioned has more capability, expand the original basic for the Timex and have multiple new features. It's not just only to save and load.
Right. And like I said, the SVI CAS wasn't really designed for the Timex per se. It was designed for the SVIs originally, but as he was developing it, you could connect it up to multiple machines. That's kind of its thing. It's not just a Timex product, right? You can hook it up to everything, anything that used a cassette deck back in the day.
It's a generic recorder, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I missed the last meeting, and you were discussing building a 2068 version of a Spectrum Next.
Well,
which, by the way, I bought the No-Go, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
Or N-Go or whatever it's called, and I still tweaking the case and the thing I was building. I was kind of playing around with all the physical hardware and stuff, and I actually haven't even turned the thing on yet.
Oh, okay.
But eventually I'll have a working. I'm putting it in a Spectrum Plus case. And so it's gonna, yeah, it's a fun project, but I work on it for a while and then it gets put on hold for like 6 months and then I get back to it. And then, anyways, it's just a project. So I know a little bit about it. I bought the little Raspberry Pi thing that goes in it. The other add-ons that you can hook up to it. But
What is this
anyways,
thing
I
called?
like the idea of the 2600 next. I was just wondering, since I missed that meeting, did you start out with a list of like must-haves?
We have not gotten to that point. We were just, sort of spitballing ideas and stuff. And we were going to talk about that potentially some more today. But before we do, I'm curious, Paul, can you describe this 2068 connected to a laptop?
Okay. A while ago, obviously, excuse me, guys, there was an article, and I tried to go through and see if I could find it again, of a 2068, like your background there, and it folded up to an LCD screen, and you could start typing. And so it's like you had your monitor with you.
Interesting.
I know they did that
recall
with
seeing that.
they did that with a Spectrum.
Yep.
I can't remember. I know they made a. I've seen that thing on retro, whatever that retro sell
All right,
my
then
retro.
maybe I'm confusing with the Spectrum then.
Yeah, it was called the Omni, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was basically a Spectrum case, but they 3D printed a monitor that could fit inside and it would fold over. Yeah, exactly.
Does this sort of look like what you had in mind, Paul?
Well, okay, looks like yes. Could have sworn it was a 2068, but maybe that's it. But anyway, no, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah. And so
So
this
anyway,
is
that's why I wanted to throw the question out there, and maybe this is what I saw, and I was just confusing it with the 68.
okay. Yeah, this is
No, I
this is a
appreciate that.
nifty little device because it has, it's based on Don Superfo's Harlequin board inside. It's not a an old Spectrum board inside. And it has 120K RAM, it's got SD card, it's got a built-in div MMC, which is, if you're a Spectrum person, is a really cool solution. And like you said, a little 9-inch LCD. It would not be difficult to do a similar solution for the 2068, because I don't know if you can tell, but there's this, it in essence, the Spectrum is mounted in a bracket that holds the screen. There's that solid dark black bar on the bottom on both sides. I think that's part of the bracket that
Like a docking station.
well, kind of, yeah. I wonder if there's a better picture of how this is done. But yeah, I've seen some other photos that
It might be similar. I'm sure it uses a similar concept to the Interface One, right? Because that you kind of bolted the Interface One to the Spectrum. But this one obviously goes much further. It goes all the way to the front of it, and it may use the existing screw holes for the case, right? You just kind of screw it in, and it kind of sandwiches it.
yeah,
Obviously pinches it into there.
yeah. I mean, you can see the hinge, right? And then the hinge has got a metal piece. I'm assuming that's metal that is shaped, to the Spectrum. Clearly, it's got some steps to it, and then that sort of solid piece underneath. I mean, it could be plastic as well. That's thick enough to be somewhat useful plastic.
Okay. I really thought it was a 2068, but no one has really seen anything like that. Oops.
No.
I haven't seen anything for a 2068 because you have to realize, the 2068 market was ultimately minuscule compared to the Spectrum market.
All right, fair point. Fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. But it wouldn't
I wish
be-
it was the other way around, but unfortunately it's not.
So, do we have people in this group, and maybe people who aren't here today? Uh, do we have a collection of talent where we could build that system? Like somebody can do the 3D printing design, someone can do I know that the Next and the NGO, they use a FPGA chip that's a programmable hardware CPU.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I personally don't know how to do that, but we would need someone who knows how to do that. And
I've never heard of the NGO, huh? That's obviously it's a clone of the Next.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I guess not too many people here have a Next, right? Because they're kind of hard to get. I know I have a Next. I got the original one. I did the original Kickstarter for that, so I have that. But I know they've got a second Kickstarter that they're still
working through.
Yeah, it still hasn't happened yet.
Mhm.
Yeah, the advantage to the NGO is that you can pick whatever case you want to put it in.
Oh, okay.
And it solved the problems of the first generation Next, where they had capacitors that were having problems and things like that. And so in some ways, some people say it's better than the actual Next board, but if it's the second Next board, I don't know, they're probably about the same.
Yeah, I know they talked about something about the filter caps that they improved on the second go around, but I just don't think that they've shipped them yet. That they're still
They're getting close from one of the updates that I saw. Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
you want to talk about FPGAs and what can be done?
Well, it depends on cost and time. I've been playing around with 2068 FPGA emulators for about the last 7 or 8 years. So I mean, it's not hard to do, and I have some experience with FPGAs. I've been using them when I was working for the last 15, almost 20 years now. So again, one of the big problems up until recently has just been the availability of the devices, but that's starting to shake out now. So the real question is, what features does the community want from something like a more updated 2068? And at what point do you stop? Because things like, adding HDMI, USB, and all this other stuff, I see that as starting to get, too far ahead of the curve. So, but again, it's possible to do. And really, ultimately, it comes to what features do you want and how much are people willing to pay for it to actually have hardware versus doing software emulation.
Right, because it's use emulators for free, right?
Yeah, and
Right. And the question, but ultimately becomes, how much is hardware worth to you? And to what Jeff is saying, you know, uh, Jeff will back me up on this. There's usually two answers to sort of any given design problem, and that is tell me when you want it and I'll tell you what you're going to get. Tell me what you want and I'll tell you how much it's going to cost. Right. And the other way of expressing that is that sort of I think it's called the golden triangle of time, quality, and money. Right. Pick two.
Mhm. So
Well,
I don't know if you guys have heard of the Aegon Light computer. It's like a Z80 processor, but it's 32-bit. Although for like how it's originally, sent out to people, it's basically emulating 8 bits with BBB BBC Basic or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think it'd be that hard. I probably couldn't do it, but I don't
Hold
think
that
it'd
up
be
again,
that
Jeff.
hard to yeah, to just convert the logic and the programming from BBC Basic to like the Sinclair Basic, and then just use that as a platform.
I know Noel's Retro, he did a pretty in-depth review of that thing. And it's not 32 bits, it actually has a 24-bit address bus on it. So that's how it
Okay.
can address way more memory, right, than the original 64K, because it does have 24-bit address bus on it. And I guess it's got some commands, right, in the machine language that allow you to use those. So I mean, granted, it is a Z80 inside of it, but it's kind of an expanded Z80, right? Where they 24-bit addresses buses. And yeah, I know they use BBC Micro Basic as their, that's the basic that's on it, right? That if you want to use basic anyway, that's the only basic. It'd be interesting to see if we could port Timex's basic onto that. That would be kind of cool. Because then that would give
And
us a platform to develop more Timex stuff, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you could
And
add
really, the
new.
hardware pretty cheap. It's only like $50 fully assembled with a case.
Yeah.
And that's delivered from Europe. So, of
Yeah,
course, you got to buy a European keyboard to make it work. But
one of the big issues that you're going to find with that platform though is that they're using an ESP32 to do the video output, and so there are some. It's not a bitmapped graphics, or at least bitmap graphics don't work really well with that. It's more optimized for vector. And I was looking at when I have some time. Don't laugh, David. When I have some time, porting over the Timex Basic to that, because you can basically load that using the operating system as a program, if you will. So that's doable. And like you said, it's a fairly inexpensive platform.
Yeah. My only kind of gripe with it is it's only VGA, right? There's no HDMI. I'm kind of like, well,
I agree. I'm totally for HDMI for whatever we do. I don't care how much money it costs. I just want HDMI.
yeah, because that's just the lowest common denominator right now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking VGA, you're going to have to find somebody that's got a VGA monitor again, right? We're going to be going into we're going to have to be buying something that's obsolete already, pretty much.
Well, you can use adapters, but it's just not as nice, right?
Right. It'd just be better to have native HDMI output on whatever product is being developed here.
They just added HDMI. Well, I mean, there were hacks before, but officially the Atari company just added it to a new re-release of the 2600. I think it came out this month. So how are they doing it on these older systems? And it can't be that complicated. Yeah.
Well, I know on the Next, on the original Spectrum Next, right? They used the Pico, right? Because you can plug the Pico in there, and that gives you a HDMI out. Because to go the official HDMI route, you got to get a license and all this other crap, right? So it starts to get pretty, I think, costly if you develop something on your own. So I know that's how they kind of got around that, was they were using the HDMI output that's on the Pico, right, on the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
And that's how you just kind of, it goes through the Pi, and you plug it into the HDMI out, because the Next doesn't have HDMI native, right? Because like I said, you would have to pay license fees and all this crap to the HDMI folks.
Well, technically that's not exactly true, because the lowest standard HDMI is actually digital DVI, which is not licensed.
True.
Oh, good.
True.
Okay. The 1080p.
Well, I know back when HDMI first came out, yeah, you could connect HDMI things to DVI monitors, but you just have to I mean, the signal lines are pretty much the same. They're just differential data lines, right? I do have some of those cables where I could connect, DVI things to HDMI monitors or vice versa, right? DVI computers to HDMI monitors. You just had this cable, right? And it would just, connect the right wires to the right pins on the HDMI output, and you wouldn't have sound. You wouldn't have any of the extra features that HDMI has now, but at least you would have the video. And so maybe, yeah, if you developed a DVI interface and then just made it go to an HDMI connector, right, instead of a DVI connector, that might work. And then, yeah, you might not, that way you probably wouldn't have to develop or pay any kind of licensing.
Good idea. Yep.
Hey, Jeff, real quick. Paul wanted to know what board that was that you were showing.
Oh, that's the Olimex version of the Aegon Light.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the exact same version I have.
I wish that made sense, but it's okay. Thank you for asking. I have no idea what you just said.
Go
Well,
slower.
like I said, Paul, Knowles Retro, he's got a YouTube channel. He did a pretty in-depth review of the original one, and so look him up. I probably could get a link here, but
Okay. Yep.
I know
I see it.
really here recently, like in the last couple of weeks, he did the review on that, and it's like a 45-minute review. It's pretty in-depth,
All right.
And
No,
that's,
thank you guys. Appreciate it.
yeah. And it's
Well,
it's a compelling unit because it's a Z80, right? It's
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see it now. I've clicked on the link. Interesting.
And it's
Okay.
really fast too.
yeah, it's super fast. I think it's running at what, 14 megahertz or
18.
18, I think.
18?
Okay. All right. Thank
Just
you guys.
for a
Appreciate it.
comparison, I built this Connect 4 game, and on the Timex Sinclair 2068, it would take like a minute and a half between moves, and on the Aegon Light 2, it'd take like maybe a half a second, maybe a second. So it's like way faster.
Is that
Yeah,
written in
but-
basic?
Yeah, but you're
Yeah, that's
missing.
some basic. Yeah, that's some basic.
That's
Thing
why.
is, you're missing that true retro computer experience, though.
Yeah, but I think there's I think that our goal should be to make a computer that is cheap enough that can be used in schools, that they can use to program in a simplistic way without having to learn 15 different technologies to make a web page and stuff, where they can just use basic. They can hit some limitations of the system and try and overcome them, and things like that. I think right now I think it's really hard for people to get into computers nowadays because it's just so complicated, because everyone wants a web app, and like, okay, it's crap built on more crap, and it changes every week. So I mean, good thing there's artificial intelligence, because that's the only thing that's going to keep us, like, how to interpret this program from this other program, because it's getting unmanageable.
Make a
But at
good
least
point. Yeah.
some basic kind of system where they could learn assembly too. It would at least give them the foundations. I mean, the Sinclair ZX81 gave me the foundation to work at Boeing, work at Microsoft, work at other companies. I mean, and the thing that I loved about the Sinclair was it had basic syntax checking. That didn't come out in other computers for like another 15 years.
Yeah, and I don't know, I didn't attend a lot of those meetings that you guys were talking about, the future, what Timex would have been in the future, what kind of machine would they have come up with, and I just kind of, again, go back to my little rant that I mentioned last time is, about the bus expansion unit, at least maybe getting that somebody getting that 3D designed and mocked up so that we can, actually have that as a platform to put things in that plug into the 2068 as we have it now. Because I don't know what kind of, yeah, we can come up with a board and all this stuff, but where are we gonna put it? What is it gonna be put in? What kind of case? What kind of keyboard? What kind of, and all those will probably get worked out eventually. I understand that, but at least right now we have a 2068 case, right? We've got the case. We could gut the internals, right, and put whatever system board you wanted to put in there. I mean, the keyboard's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the best thing, but it's something we're used to. But you could certainly have a modern guts inside of it, right? And there's obviously a lot of room because the expansion ports, the board would have to be almost as big as the case is now, the original PCB.
Yeah.
Right.
Or it'd have to be
Just so that everything
connected.
Yeah, right. So that everything would line up on the back, right? Because that's your physical, you have physical constraints.
What
Right,
about
the expansion
using
ports
the,
were at.
what about using the
Go ahead.
modem box?
Well, Paul, you're going in a direction that is similar to what I was thinking, and that is, what if we ask Gary Grimes if he'd be interested in designing a new case? And for the folks who we're not there along. This is a few years back, I think. We had Gary Grimes on, and he's the guy, the industrial designer who designed the 2068 case, and he came on and he showed us his various iterations of what he thought it might look like, and as it turns out, he only worked at Timex for a year, but prior to that, he worked at Philips, designing stereo systems, and went back to Philips to design stereo systems. But yeah, he's the person responsible for that case, and he's retired. But I would
You
not
could get him to do one project.
that's exactly what I'm thinking is, just ask him and say, hey, Gary, we're kind of spitballing here, and we need a new case. What do you think?
Well, that's what the list I think we should make a list of wants and must-haves and things like that. Because see, I would envision a case that doesn't have that extra space with the cartridge slot, but it does have the slot still. It's just on the side or in the back, and so it's not as wide. And I don't know if people agree with that, but
Well, they made a case like that. It's called the Timex Computer 2048, right? They lopped off the
yeah, so it'd be
the
closer to
cartridge port.
that. Yeah, as far as the way it looks, it would be closer to that. Yeah.
Well, what about the BEU that's in that promo picture of the micro drives and everything else? What is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I'd like to see if we could actually get that mocked up and built. So
That's
that would
cool.
give the 20, well, because it's kind of a personal thing of mine. I would love to see that all together,
Agreed.
Plus it gives everything someplace to sit, right? Like you're mentioning the 2050 modem, the 2040 printer. I don't see micro drives in the future, but I have some silver. Well, I'm in the process of making some silver micro drives like Timex would have made out of some, Sinclair micro drives that I have. And, so, like I said, my ultimate goal is to, have that in real life.
Well,
the problem with that is it's bulky, and some people might want to carry theirs around.
Well, it's just an expansion unit, right? It's not, the computer, but I understand. I'm kind of not saying that as far as the future in terms of what, the Timex might have done in the future. I'm kind of saying, at least for now, we're developing all these things that plug into the existing 2068.
Yep.
Right. And that bus expansion unit would be a perfect place for all that stuff to live inside and be nice and look aesthetically pleasing. Would be inside the 2060 bus expansion unit instead of something that's just plug and hanging off the back of it. You know what I mean? So you
And-
could kind of design it with, like I mentioned before, expansion slots, right? So you could have multiple cards in there that does, multiple things. It's kind of similar to Jeff's expansion port that he already kind of has,
Mhm.
right? And it's just some place for all these little toys to live, and be aesthetically pleasing. You can dock the 2068 machine into this. It would have its own power supply, so that you don't have this wall wart that you just be able to plug it straight into the wall and have an IEC connector on the back and have a switching power supply inside.
Mm.
Yeah. Have you
Mhm.
seen the guy who sells it's this Spectrum micro drive case and you stick an SD card in it?
Yeah, I have that
Yeah,
as well. The
yeah.
V drive. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And I was
that's
actually
basically what you want to do, but make it silver and match and
right. Right. I have like 5 or 6 micro drives from Sinclair, right? But they're black and they're raised. The lettering, the Sinclair is raised like it is on all of the Sinclair stuff. So you have to file that down, smooth it out. They're different things. But anyway, the other thing I was thinking on the 2060, if you look at the picture of it, it's kind of like the 2068 where it's got the angle and then the straight down. You might
Mhm.
actually be able to put that V drive unit, right there in that little
In that little
part. So
bevel.
yeah, so you would have an SD card micro drive kind of in, or maybe 2 of them. You could put 2 cutouts, right? So
Hmm.
you could have at least one, but maybe there's blanks in there, right? So if you're not using them at all, well, there would just be blanks there, so it wouldn't mess up the aesthetics. But if you wanted to use that, or maybe not necessarily a micro drive, but at least that the way he's designed that, I need to look at what I've got from him and see how he actually does it. I know he's got a whole frame that he built that goes inside of the microdrive. It totally replaces the guts of the microdrive. So, but we
yeah.
may be able to come up with something that could mount an SD card because it's not very tall, right? I think it would perfectly fit in there, and you could put that couple SD cards in that front part there, and some kind of interface to use them as storage.
Yeah,
Joe?
this is Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, I suppose, unless I 3D printed some microdrive cases, I don't have any of those to use. So like, I'm perfectly fine with just having an SD card port, but it'd be kind of cool if they hooked into something that let them be used as the microdrives, even if I didn't have, a case, if they were
Well,
integral, like I think Carl was describing.
yeah, I mean, and like I said, if somebody could come up with a 2060 case, I think we could probably shoehorn some type of interface one interface inside of that thing, right? That would connect up to the 2068. Because I still need to try that. I think about it on these calls, and then life happens and you forget about it. But
Mhm.
I have an interface one. I have 2068. It's just it wouldn't plug in directly. Obviously, it's a Spectrum bus. We'd have to have to get a twister board. But I think I'm almost positive that if you plug the interface one into the 2068, that would work with the micro drives. I don't really see why it wouldn't.
Oh,
Yeah,
the
it would.
ROM
Yeah, with
addresses
the
are off.
twister board.
Yeah, because all the interface, all the the cat and the format and all those routines are in the XROM now, right? They had to move them over there to make space for all the other stuff that they added. But those routines are still, as far as I know, there, so they should work, right? Because
I don't
They're not
think
there.
so. I don't think so, Carl, because the interface one branches to several routines in the Spectrum ROM.
really,
Yep.
Yeah, you'd have to run a Spectrum ROM in your 2068
Yeah.
for it to work.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought he was actually talking about using a Spectrum ROM.
no,
okay.
because
Yeah.
because I think all those commands they're just from the Spectrum ROM, right? And Timex moved them up there because they needed space. But I
So
don't know that they changed the routines any.
No, No, you need to recompile the version. You can run, but you need the source code and recompile with the new addresses in the Timex operating system. That could
Right,
be
right.
possible, but
Okay.
it's
Well,
not
so it's not
available. Yeah,
it's not hard to do. It's just my main thing is either that or we do an interface where we kind of do that hardware wise. Because what
Well,
is when you do cat on the 2068, what is it really doing?
so the thing I wanted to try to figure out was that Series 1 dog file, which was a modified Timex, I guess, home ROM, plus a modified Interface 1 ROM in I think it's the XROM bank. It works on that Wariabo emulator. It would require something, though, looking at the I/O ports that it would be talking through to then turn around and talk to the SD card. But otherwise, I think that would be a potential solution.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, like I said, the V drives go inside of an existing microdrive case, right? And so I can't remember what the guy's name is. Charlie, I think is it Charlie maybe that's doing all those. But anyway, he got a circuit board in there obviously because it plugs into the interface 1 cable, right? That plugs into the side of the microdrives,
Yeah,
and
so that
it must convert the microdrive signals. So instead of going to a tape, it goes to an SD card. So all those guts, all that electronics and interfacing is done,
well, but
in his device.
those are the microdrive signals that the interface 1's putting out. The interface 1 on the other side is talking on the bus, looking at the I/O ports
Right.
that are being written to by the ROM, and then turning around and saying, okay, here's the signal I got to send to the microdrive port.
Well,
And then
did Timex change that?
So
I mean,
Carl,
have we really looked at the routines for
the smarts are not
microdrives?
there.
Okay.
I mean, the commands are there in the ROM, but there's no smarts behind them. And the way that the interface 1 works like an XROM, in a sense. It hooks in at
interrupt.
Yeah, restart 8.
Restart 8. Okay, thank you. And in essence, you're creating an error when you type an interface 1 command.
Right, right.
And so that's where the restart 8 comes in, and it takes over at that point. And then there are 2 magic addresses that it will switch back at, but those addresses are tied to the Spectrum ROM. And as Gustavo was saying, you could sort of rewrite the code, the interface 1 to talk to the 2068, with the addresses, and it would be perfectly fine. But Gustavo, I mean, at that point, wouldn't it be easier or make more sense just to use the FDD ROM?
Correct. No, I create and recompile the source code for the interface 1 and Timex and put the variables in the middle of the operating system area chunk tree. If you analyze the mapping of the Timex, you see a hole in the middle of the variables area, and this hole is matched with the interface 1 or floppy, not floppy, what is this? The micro drive variables used. Okay, but the problem, I not continue with this operating system ported to the Timex because I receive less space in the basic area, and that is incompatible with most of the program because the basic program starts in the specific area, and if you move the area up, you lost compatibility with some programs that thinking is located in the standard basic load address. That is the reason because I discard to continue with this deployment.
Which is, not to say that it's not impossible, but there's probably better
That's only for the
solutions with
it's
new hardware.
It's possible only for the show, but in the real life, you don't need the show. You need to run the program. The
Oh.
compatibility issue is the most important when you move on storage devices.
Okay.
For example, the storage that David mentioned in the beginning is 100% compatibility with the normal tapes routines. That is important when you copy a program from tape to the digital storage. One of the key points, you don't need to rewrite the code. Okay, it's difficult. You need to a version for drive, a version for tape. In this case, the tape is transparent to the SD storage interface. That is the important key on this. And also use the same instruction, not use user call or machine code exchange behaviors. No. The most important part is using the same basic routines and commands that the ROM has.
Real quick.
Well,
So Carl,
go
speaking
ahead.
to your physical format thing, the Commodore folks have a very cute solution to this. And if you're, a Commodore user, you've probably seen this thing
Yeah.
called an SD. Right. Okay. So they made a little tiny case, and when I say tiny,
Yeah, it's a miniature 14
Miniature.
or 1541 drive. Yeah,
yeah,
with an SD card in the front. Yep.
and I mean, this is actually about how big the SD to IEC is. It doesn't take up a lot of physical space. I don't think there's a picture of the PCB itself, but it just plugs into the that's the serial port, right? I think.
Yeah, it's
It's
the same.
using the cassette for power. And then we just load shit off that teeny tiny thing, and we could do something similar, especially because there are SD card extension devices, and it's just like this long ribbon cable that you just one end plugs into an SD card slot, and the other end is a very small SD card slot.
Yeah.
So
that's why I was kind of thinking you might be able to do something like that in the cartridge port. I know it's a lot of, it's not that much space in there, but if we don't put it in a case, if you put it like a PC board, like most of the stuff is these days, that you could probably have enough space to do something like that, right? Make a SD card storage cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
So at least you could save and load, your programs much easier than coming from tape. or trying to go out and try and find one of these, rare as hell floppy drive systems, which again, like I said, I appreciate them, but they're, I think we probably want to go towards, the solid state mediums.
I can tell you one.
I like to think of you could easily think of the SD card as just an evolution of the microdrive.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything these days is solid state. So I mean, yeah, you can't develop something for modern times that doesn't use, I mean, SD cards are ambiguous, right? I mean, everything uses them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep pushing what David was saying, but I mean, we do have an SD card solution that's, about a month away.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, if the 2060 case was made and we had those little notch cutouts that just fit this SD card connector, right, then you would have at least some place to plug the SD card into, and it would be, like I said, I mean, nothing wrong with Jeff's card there, but like I said, it's kind of hanging off of the back, and it can get knocked and spilled things on. And
well, you know what? To your point, Carl, this is something that Jeff has thought about in that design. Is hey Jeff, can you hold that up for a sec? I'm going to spotlight you.
It would be in a new case, wouldn't it?
So, one of the things that if you look at the board that Jeff has designed, it's not symmetrical. Okay, it hangs off to the right a little bit, and he lined it up sort of with the right hand side of the case with a little bit of extra room that would accommodate you know like a 3D printing case or whatever. So there's the idea being that, you know, this could go inside of what you're talking about, Carl, you know, a magic case, right? And there'd be a space, you know, maybe it's not vertical, maybe it's horizontal, right? So then, you know, it would require a different configuration of the expansion bus, you know, instead of being like what Jess has, it might have to go, there you go.
Well, I mean, Jeff could just make a little riser card that goes
Exactly.
into his slot, and it would
Yep.
be right
Yeah.
angled.
Yep.
Yeah, so it would, the card would be flat instead of tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Well,
on
but
the
aren't we
SD,
also talking about just designing a whole new 2068 motherboard? And wouldn't we just integrate that into that new motherboard?
And
Yes.
yes.
So, you know,
Right,
we're
I
looking
think-
at two different
right.
use cases. One is to allow us to add peripherals and other goodies to our 2068 hardware, and the other would be another more advanced 2068 using modern components, so that we don't have to worry about our old stuff dying and then being left with no place to play.
Left with a pile of smoke. Ingo and Joe, since both of y'all have 3D printers and have some, you know, experience in that, what's your thoughts in terms of, can we do this? Can we do a 2060, you know, 3D printable thing?
Yeah,
not
definitely.
only 3D printable, but I mean, you know, you could 3D print the first prototype of the case, and then clean it up and get it to where you can make a silicon mold, and then you could just, you know, resin mold these cases and have them, you know, but you could also release the STL files and let people print them themselves, you know. I think it's very doable.
Yeah, because I know last meeting, you know, like I said, I don't have that expertise, right? I don't work in the 3D world, but I mean, I don't think it's a very difficult design, because it's basically just a rectangle. Yeah, it's got some angles on it and things like that, but and it's got an overhang, you know, obviously the 2068 is designed to kind of go inside of it a little bit. I mean, there's not a whole lot of depth there. It's not like you know, it's probably, I don't know, maybe an inch and a half or two. But I just think that would have to be a starting point, right? We would need to actually get a physical 2060 that we could start developing with, right? I mean, we would need to know how much space we have inside, where to put the bosses, because you can't just, you know, there's got to be some supports, you know, inside. So if you do put things on the top, it's not gonna, you know, stress out the plat. You know, you have to have some bosses inside there to take that weight, right, and distribute it to the bottom of the case. And so, I mean, you know, what other boards we design, that's kind of the thing, right? You know, when we get into designing things, it's like, okay, you, at least in my mind, you know, you kind of have to start with a physical box, right, that you can put things into. And so you need to know things like, yeah, where are those bosses going to be at? So when you make printed circuit boards, you can design those printed circuit boards with holes cut out there, or, you know, so that you can put the board in there around the supports of whatever the case needs, right?
Yeah,
Instead of
and
the other way around.
Same thing with, you know, earlier conversations about, you know, the existing keyboard. I mean, we could make a better keyboard, a mechanical keyboard, and design the case around that as well, you know. And my brother's right now, as we speak, he's redesigning the Kilo Z case that I showed you guys before, to, you know, have a better top and bottom that actually screw together and incorporate the new keyboard that I made on the PCB with the mechanical switches that are hot swappable, and you know, all these things will have then the motherboard inside of the, you know, a ZX81 or a TS1000 motherboard will fit inside. You'll have access to the expansion port and everything, and we can do exactly the same thing. And I think, you know, getting Joe or me or anybody else that's in the 3D printing space and can do the 3D modeling, working with whoever's using, KiCad or some other PC board design software, right? Integrate those things and work together to come up with, it might take a couple of different iterations, but with fast prototyping and 3D printing, you can do that stuff really fast and really cheap. And just keep modifying the models so that everything fits together and it meets our list of must-haves or like-to-haves. And there could be different options too. That's the other cool thing, is we could have one that has certain amount of stuff already in it, kind of just the generic offering, and then another one that's maybe more the tinkerer prototyper model where you attach this bus expansion unit that has multiple card slots where you can stick in different features and options or do your own prototyping from it.
I'm going to put a picture of the 2068 or 2060 thing we're talking about up because, not everybody knows what we're talking about visually. And so we're talking about this, like, as Carl, you said it, this thing that the 2068 is sort of encased by, right? And you can see that there's a cassette player on top. And if you look on the right-hand side, there's a very faint bit of brightness that indicates that this thing is deeper than the 2020. It's probably as deep as the 2050 modem.
Right. It has to be at least as deep as the 2050. And it's got an angle in the front because it kind of matches the angle that's on the 2068 on the front of the keyboard, the front edge. And I'm thinking on the, not where the bevel is, but straight down from that, you could probably have little cutouts or, like I said, maybe blanks.
In the flat
kind
space.
of right there. Right. That's where you put the SD cards.
Okay.
Or one SD card.
On the right side of that image, you can kind of see the back right corner.
Yeah. Right. I'm not
to get
I'm
a
saying
sense of the depth.
Right. It's at least as deep as the 2050, probably a little bit more, but not much. Right.
Well, it goes beyond the 2020 recorded area.
But I'm talking the 2050. See how the
talking about
2050 is longer?
The size of this box is similar to the FDD3 case, except
really?
the length. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go to. Oops, I thought I was gonna go there. Let's try that again.
Yeah, because I think that's the only picture we really have of that, right?
Yes. All right, Gary. So here's these drawings that Gary did, and this is the one I wanted to show. Is here was one idea he had for what this thing might look like. I don't know what this thin bit on top is, and to me it looks like these two pieces in the middle are probably disk drives.
Yeah.
But you can see it's a radically different.
We're not seeing that yet.
It's fairly different from the
I don't think you're showing that screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I
Well, I'm seeing it.
Yeah,
I can see it.
I can see it.
In here.
The power supply is similar to the FDD3 has. The FDD3 has a power supply in a similar box like you present in this schema.
Okay.
And also the FDD drives you can put on the 1, 2, and 3 in the same line in the controller plus the two drives and use the same space that the machine has.
Yeah.
The natural storage for this is the FDD made or finished in Timex Portugal. Maybe not in US, but the Timex developer was deploying this system. Maybe, I don't know if the continuity and started in US and then finishing in Portugal. I don't know.
You'll notice that those boxes are not deep enough for a US floppy drive.
Oh, maybe they're deep enough for the. They look like they're deep enough for the 3-inch, but yeah, there's an issue there because they're not as deep as they are wide.
I have one at home. I can take the measurement and share with you, David, if you like.
Well, and the date on this is sort of Paul's question about manufacturing. The date on this is June 10th of 83 of that drawing.
Well, the 5 1/4 floppy was pretty long.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It's really
David, can
was.
I grab the screen for a minute?
Yeah. And even though Adam's not here, I believe I did turn on the sharing. Go
Okay.
ahead. Yeah, you should be able to.
Gustavo, is this kind of what you were talking about?
No, no, no. This is
Okay.
the FDDD 3000.
Okay.
This is the next step. My drive is the three boxes, small boxes. One box is the power supply, another box is the controller, and the next box is the floppy drive.
And
Okay.
After that, Timex create this version, like you show now, with 64K of memory. The original FDD3 has 16K in the control.
Okay.
And use a Timex CX81 RAM pack inside. It's a mix of the hardware, the Sinclair hardware inside. Okay. And also then the interface with the computer is similar to the 1510 cartridge box for the previous machine,
Yeah,
except
that's the
there we go.
original. Yeah, that's
right,
the original drives. Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. I
Yeah.
have this in silver version that was sold by Zebra in US.
Yep.
I have this exactly this.
Yep.
Okay, works very very fine.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just saying, if we're we're developing these new things. I think a little slim bus expansion unit like the original picture had. I think that would be a great place for a lot of these things to live. Like just imagine Jeff's board being inside of that thing, and hooked up to SD cards that were in the front of it, so that it would be, I mean, we're kind of futurizing it, I guess, if that's a word. But again, it's using the original hardware. Down the road, maybe that can be modified to work with, or it may not even be necessary, right, on a modern version of the 2068, because there may be enough room in the computer itself to have all this stuff inside of it. You wouldn't need a bus expansion unit, right, if you had the original. I mean, if you had all this, surface mount stuff nowadays, you could imagine the stuff you could pack into the size of the 2068 case we have now.
Well,
there's tons of room in there. I mean,
You could
things
fit a
are
mini
really
ITX board in there.
yeah, exactly. If you stayed with that kind of design, I personally do like how the 2068 is aesthetically. It's a wedge. It's not very tall. It's it's a little wide, but I mean, aesthetically, to me, I like it. Even today,
No,
I
yeah. No, the most important part is the command that Timex think to use in the operating system. For example, the next step of the extension for the original BASIC was made in Portugal, like Timex used in OS 64, or in the next computer, using the TNet interface for the network interface. Timex development a new commands to support the networking and also to support new features.
Mhm.
The one of the most important part is to keep or to get this software in ROM or whatever in order to preserve the Timex developer, the original Timex developer, because we have a ton of solutions created by enthusiastic developers in the world, but not the original. The original was made in Portugal. But it's difficult for us in America to get the results from Portugal, especially for me. But I don't know if any in the group has more contact with the Portugal guys.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Jeff has the right idea. Jeff, of solution both paths, right? Make that box that we can stick on our classic silver boxes, and also figure out what goes into the new thing, right? and then, how much does it cost? Tell me how much you want to pay, and I'll tell you what you can get.
But
Yeah, and unlike the Spectrum Next, keep the unobtainium content as low as possible.
Yeah.
no, but now it's software because the cost is for any CPU, like a Raspberry CPU or whatever. That is the hardware cost. The rest is software. You can emulate all the system, but you don't need the real system with the real hardware.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope Dave we start writing a list. It
Well-
really does help because like I would put on there I basically want a switch or a button or something on the case where I can just switch to Spectrum mode.
Mhm.
And then the keyboard, I'm not sure what you guys are doing with the keyboard, but even though we all liked the original keys, you still got to admit they're annoying to type on.
I
So-
think like is the wrong word. Marginally tolerate is probably
Yeah.
a better.
Well, compared to the 1000, it was like way better. Yeah.
Yeah, I really didn't have a problem with the keyboard, but I do understand it's not a it's not a full travel keyboard like the Commodore 64, for instance,
Well, I
had,
think
or
we
the
should
VIC
match
20.
the colors and the aesthetics of the original keyboard, but then have somehow just better keys that you can type on faster and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think if you, yeah, I kind of like that idea. Like, yeah, it would look maybe David, wasn't it like the lower profile keycaps you had used, and then you get them in the similar color with the legends on, and
Well,
that might be pretty nice.
so I don't know that the folks who do the custom keycap printing do lower keycaps, and so the compromise that I've made is on my computer is I have just lower keycaps, and I go on memory of the magic key.
So basically, I put a link to a YouTube thing where this guy developed a keyboard, right? I mean, there's several of them out there, but this is for a ZX81.
Yeah.
And he developed a PCB, and because where are you going to find a keyboard these days? Like we used to find, you go down to Radio Shack and you could get a TI-99 4A keyboard in a plastic wrap, right?
Yep.
You can't find those kind of keyboards anymore. So basically, he's designed a printed circuit board, and he's got tactile keys, right? You have to solder in, but then he talks about going through and developing keycaps. Right, so he had a company, I guess in the U.S. it's called WASD, kind of,
Yeah.
for the 3D for the game players out there. But I think it was for $60, and you can pick, the color of the keycaps even individually for the $60. I mean, each keycap could be a different color for $60.
Yes.
And I mean, you kind of have to go through that video, but I think he's got a website and he's got the files that you can actually download, and you can send them to that company to make the keycaps for you. So that's just kind of another option to throw into this thing where, once we develop a keyboard, you could have this company make the keycaps, and then they would be, I think you probably still want to put some kind of clear sticker over the top of them, right? Because so you don't rub them off.
No, you don't need to because they use UV printing, so it actually goes into the keycap. It's pretty wear resistant.
Okay. But I mean, $60 for a set of keycaps isn't bad. I mean, it's not great. It'd be great if they were $30, but hey, $60 is definitely palatable, right? I mean, it's not like it's $500. That would be like, I don't think so.
There used to be some keys that had a clear plastic cover over the working portion of the keycap.
Yeah, there used to be keys that you could pop the clear part off, and you could actually put your own labels inside and push the clear back. But those are long gone.
No, actually, Carl, they're still around.
Those right now.
Oh, okay.
And they're lower profile now.
Yeah,
They make a lower profile version of that, and it's still around. Yeah.
I just bought 100 of those.
Okay.
They were less than $1 a piece too.
Yeah.
I mean, from an aesthetic standpoint, to me, they don't look that great. I get it. I get it while they're there because you can put your own labels underneath there. I would personally like to have the keycaps, like if this is the way the guy is doing it through WASD and they're UV printed, you know, that would obviously be the best aesthetically, you know, looking keycap. And you could have different colors for the different things, and you know, I mean, whatever we end up doing, but
Who said they bought 100?
Joe
I
did.
I think Joe did.
Yep.
Joe?
Yep.
Do you have a picture of what you bought?
Hang on just a second.
And so
Or
while
pop
Joe's
a link in the.
yeah, drop a yeah. And while Joe's looking, I designed a little circuit board that drops into the 2068. Go ahead. Let me pin you, Joe. Hang on a sec. Okay. Looks like you have a focus.
Oh, those don't look as cheap as the other ones I was thinking
No,
about.
Yeah.
These are originally designed for point of sale systems.
Yeah.
And replace
Okay.
all your keys with
Right.
type keycaps.
See, what I like those, but what I would personally prefer is thinner keys like you see on laptops.
What's a side view? Give us a side view, Joe.
Sure. They're not very high profile. Can you see that?
They're pretty. Yeah, that's pretty low
That's nice.
profile to me. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
probably half the size.
how much, if you could have that slightly underneath the case where it only stuck up, you know, a centimeter, or basically when you push the button, it would be flat with the case.
Yeah.
Then those would work. Yeah.
Would you need an overlay for the other commands to be illustrated?
No, I don't know if you can see that, but I just printed off an insert.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of not in focus, but you know, I added all the extra commands and that kind of stuff on there.
Yeah, you'd still have an overlay for the rest of the commands, but I think
What do you
those
mean an
would work
overlay? I don't understand what you mean.
on the case.
No, you can't focus. I have everything's printed on the keycap. So like the Q, it has sign and less than or equal to plot and ASN. It's all on the keycap, but I just can't.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you? This camera won't pick it up.
Right.
It won't focus on that closely.
Yeah.
But do you see the red
Macro
line?
mode. You got macro mode?
No, not on this camera.
Okay.
This is a laptop thing.
One of the problems with the keys is because Timex use rectangle key and all the rest of the keyboard for machines or for PCs was square.
Yep.
That is the main issue. Every time you see the Timex use a key like a backspace or shift or alt, is different size. It's not a square. When you need to recreate the space, it's impossible with the squares.
Well, I don't know. If you look at the video and you look at you know, how, because he goes through how he designed the keys, and you know, he goes through ordering them, and he goes through showing you, you know, what he got.
Carl,
and he puts
I'm gonna
the keys.
show. So this is
that's yours. Yeah.
This is right, and this is actually Willie ordered some keycaps, and he sent me this picture. You know, and part of the problem is that inside the cavity in the 2068, you don't have a lot of space, and that's why the shift keys are dropped. If you're willing to accept a shift key that's roughly the same size as a regular key, or maybe a 1.25, I think you can squeeze a 1.25 on the left. You can certainly squeeze a full-size shift in on the right-hand side. But this was, I think it's 50 or 60 bucks now. This particular, these are from WASD.
Okay, so he got them from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So the
and
problem is these are full height keys. Even if you use low profile key switches, it's full height keys, which kind of blows, in my
Well,
opinion.
maybe they have the option for half height keycaps at WA Steve.
Yeah, that would fix it.
It would be awesome if they did. I don't know if they do.
well, but the thing is that if we're looking at if this is a keyboard for the current 2068, we're limited by the footprint. On the other hand, if we're looking at a keyboard for a follow-on, then really it's kind of up to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be good for a follow-on to consider that.
Yeah. I wonder
We
Because
can
then we
call
could
the
have
20 next.
Well, there's always the option also of just having an external keyboard and connecting it to the expansion port, because that works perfectly fine.
Yep. Or a USB keyboard, and but again, the issue is keycap height. I'm glad I'm not the only one that likes low profile.
I guess I would say is maybe the discussion has to be had about maybe the ROM, because if you said, oh, we're going to redo things a lot, then maybe you don't need all the keyword stuff. That's just maybe
Well,
that's
and
too much.
Jay mentioned there, if you read in his comment that he was, are we going to maintain I guess the original typing scheme to me is, the keycat keywords, right? And or are we going to type the commands out? Later Sinclairs did that, right? Because they had the UI.
That's what I was thinking of. It's the 128, for example.
Right, because you could kind of do it either way, I guess. But that wasn't an option until the later Sinclairs. Obviously the Spectrum there, they were just keywords. You couldn't type the whole command out. The machine wouldn't understand that. But on the later ones, sure, you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you, I guess maybe what he's kind of getting at there is maybe if you do go to the, don't do the keywords anymore, well, then you don't need all these symbols and things on the keycaps.
Yep, that was the thought. But obviously, it's probably a bit more of a, ROM rewriting project, because we had to do this to it. It's not like you put a 128 ROM in there, right? So,
Well, a lot of the Spectrums allow you to switch between ROMs. The new ones, I mean, you can just use a dip switch, or you can. There's other ways they do it, but you switch between ROMs, and I think a new version should kind of allow someone to do that if they want to run an older ROM.
I think there was a Spectrum ROM board that Oliver did for his expansion bus.
Yeah.
Willie has those plans now, I believe.
Yeah. There's a bunch of Spectrum ROM options. So you guys reminded me that Jack Doheny wrote. Is this machine language? I think this is a little machine language. Yeah, it looks like it's a little machine language plugin that lets you type in the keywords without, you can turn off on the fly. You can turn off that ability, that auto keyword thing, and just type them in. So it was written by some guy named Glenn Kendall. It was published in Your Computer in 1984, and then Jack adapted it to the 2068. So
wow.
So that's a potential solution. It's not a big program. You can download it and play with it if you want to. I put the link in the chat. Actually, go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing to consider dealing with ROMs is, as long as the hardware is designed properly, you can essentially load a ROM as a program that is executing on the underlying hardware. And so you could load a Spectrum ROM, you could load a 128K ROM set or whatever you wanted. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that goes along with that, obviously, is the ULAs for those machines, right? Because they were developed to be able to do those kind of things. It's also, it's not just the ROMs, the software, there's also the hardware that supports it doing that.
right.
Right.
And the key there, Carl, is how much compatibility do you want? Because a lot of the old Spectrum 48K games actually cycle count things like the vertical refresh signal, or and they use it to figure out where in the beam chasing that they are. So
right. And I think that's why the Next was kind of done the way it was, so they could get it to a hardware compatibility level, right?
Right.
As opposed to emulation, which wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, I envision like an NGO board that has an additional feature of selecting 2068, and also new version of the 2068 where you can have more memory, write new games for it or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what Jeff was getting at, that you can just sort of load profiles, based on some sort of.
I'm still really curious about, trying to get the 2068 microdrive routines to actually work. That'd be kind of interesting to see how that would pan out. Because I assume you probably guys are right that they really, they kind of moved them to the XROM and they kind of didn't really mess with them because they didn't have enough time, right? That wasn't on their bucket list. They needed to get the machine so that they could sell the damn thing. And obviously the tape routines work, but the microdrive doesn't use the tape routines. Right. And then of course, like you said, the Restart 8, obviously those are going to vector off into the XROM. Right, so there has to be some bank switching involved with that, right? Because it just doesn't happen automatically. There has to be some, okay, well, Restart 8, you're doing a microdrive routine. Okay, we need to bank in the XROM now. So I kind of guessed it was a pie in the sky dream to have a twister board, plug in the interface 1, and do a catalog on the 2068 and have it work. I kind of, was like, yeah, that probably isn't going to work, but it would be great if it did, because like I said, the routines are there. They're just.
Carl, I think I think there's probably some, like I say, that Series 1 doc file that I got working with the Variable emulator.
Right.
Basically has the interface 1 routines rewritten to be in, I think it's the XROM for the 2068. And
okay.
And the home ROM is different. I've started to look at the disassembly of each. There's differences. It's required with the other one, and it's adjusted to work with that.
Okay.
And then
maybe we could physically
is,
burn those and put them into a real 2068 and see if that works.
Well, no, it won't. But what it's designed to do is ultimately then when you do those microdrive commands, it's going to send stuff out. I think it sends stuff out these IO ports. And
right.
Now in that emulator, it was designed for that emulator.
Mm-hmm.
But
okay.
The thing was that it's not like it has magic code, I don't think, is it just talks out the IO ports. What happens is in that emulator, when it sees IO out ports it doesn't know that are rather unsupported for emulation, that emulator calls out to a DOS TSR chain to see if there's a TSR that will service it.
Right.
And so that the guy wrote a DOS TSR to service those IO requests and talk to files on your disk as MDR files. So my thought was, if you actually had these ROMs in a real machine, which I tried to load with via the dock support in the backbit, but that you just need something on the bus that's looking at those particular IO ports it's talking to and speak that language, which I'm guessing might be whatever we used to say to the interface one.
Mm.
And then turn that around to an SD card.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to look at the Spectrum ROM and see how, let's say, catalog, for instance, works. And then see how catalog works on the 2068, because, like you said, I do believe even in the Spectrum, right? You type catalog, it's going to be like, oh, this is an error. I don't know what this is. But there's a restart 8, like you said, so it's going to capture that and go to the right code in the ROM, in the Spectrum ROM that handles catalog. Well, that's what I think. I don't know.
Well, if it works the same way as in the 2068, and I've looked at that section of the code, any of those disk commands or
microdrive commands,
they essentially go to a stub routine that just calls restart 8, and there's no code in the ROM that actually handles any of that.
Okay, so we'd have to develop that code then.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is that this code is that it's someone who did that work.
So,
well, yeah, but he's got a DOS TSR that kind of interfaces
I know,
with that.
I know, but all of that's doing is it's forwarding IO reads and writes. Okay, basically the ROM in the emulator, the ROM code in the emulator says write this byte out this port, and that port is a particular one that's otherwise the emulator doesn't service with emulated hardware, and it says, okay, forward that on to the DOS TSR. So it's not like it's talking to the TSR with like.
Oh, but that's just so that it would work in the emulation realm.
Yeah, the emulator has a hook that if
right.
there's IO to any unsupported hardware emulation port, it forwards it on. What I'm saying is if you had that ROM in a real machine, it would be going out that IO port on the bus, which you could look at.
Right. Right. And maybe that's the same IO port that the interface one uses. I don't know off the top of my head what IO port it uses, but
my guess is it probably certainly wouldn't be impossible to change if you could go edit that,
Yeah, you could change the code easily, right? Well, obviously you would want it to match whatever the interface one is, because like I said, I don't think the catalog routine is the catalog routine there, Jeff? I mean, is it the same basic routine that was from the Spectrum? Or is it's
just not there.
Oh, it's not there at all.
That or
no, it's not.
There's no way. It's not in the XROM, and the problem is that there's a lot of dead code in the main basic ROM as well, and there's no way to tell what's good and what's bad code without actually doing a really serious deep dive into it, which I haven't done.
So all they really did was flesh out the tape routines, because the tape routines are also in the XROM. And so they must have fleshed out those and kind of left the other ones blank.
Yeah.
My sense is that obviously the routines were just going to be, essentially mostly moving the existing interface one stuff, but you have to adapt it, right? And they probably just didn't get to that. And obviously they thought, well, if we want to, we're just probably going to reissue another ROM.
Well, and what, Ryan, one thing to be aware of is that the interface one ROM, and I've looked at the disassembly, it actually calls specific addresses in the Spectrum ROM to do things like parse command lines and do things like that, which means that if you want to adapt the interface one ROM to the 2068, you need to know where all of that stuff is. And as David originally said, there are also a couple of magic addresses that are used to branch back into the standard ROM, so you can do calls or jumps back. So it's not impossible by any means. It's just not going to be particularly trivial.
Right.
Because some of the routines that are called were in the lower 8K of the original Spectrum ROM, but they've been bumped up past the 8K in the Timex ROM, and I'm not sure whether or not you'll be able to do the jumps that you expect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying is that apparently that's what was done in this porting of interface 1 to the XROM, is that it must be doing exactly as you described, have to redo the calls into the home ROM.
I guess we'd have to see those ROM images that you have for that emulator so that we could kind of look and see what's going on in there.
Yeah, well, I had sort of disassembled each one, and I started to just side by side diff the disassembly with the disassembly of the home ROM, for example, and saw that okay, there are differences, and I guess from the description it sounded like they would had to change a few things possibly to be able to, maybe it's the go back and forth once you call the home ROM routine, perhaps.
There may be some code available. I should send Dave, the last box I sent him had a program on tape, and it called Tape Lister.
Okay.
I don't know and don't remember using it, but I had it.
Okay. Gentlemen, it's 4. And if Adam were here 15 minutes ago, he would have warned me. So a couple things. Is everybody here on the groups.io 2068 list? And if you're not, I'm going to put it in chat. If you're not, make sure you are on that list, because that's the best place to sort of have conversations like this. And I'm going to take the output, the recording of our meeting, and try to capture, some of the ideas that y'all expressed, and put it into a Google survey thing, and it'll give you the option of also adding your own ideas, and then that goes into a spreadsheet that we can all look at. And as I think Eric said, at least start with a list, right? And then we can talk about that list perhaps at our next meeting, which will be, oh gosh, when will the next meeting be? November.
You need a paper calendar.
Sorry?
You need a paper calendar.
I need a paper calendar. I know. Well, there's a lot of things that I need.
Would it be the either going to
6th.
be the 30th or the 6th? Well, it'd be the next month, right? So
yeah, the first Monday is so November 6th is the first Monday. So let's, we've got a good head of steam here on this idea, on these ideas. So I think let's continue if y'all are interested. And I'll, like I said, I'll put a little Google survey thing together and send that to the list, to the groups.io list. That's why I'm asking, if you're not on there, get on there and participate in that way. So we'll have perhaps a some kind of working discussion points for the next meeting. And if I can suggest, Ingo and maybe Joe, can you guys start looking into what it would take to make a 3D model of the 2060?
Yeah, the only real problem I have with that is the size. I only have like an 8x8 bed.
Okay.
And I can't even.
I just bought a bigger one, Joe. So
Oh, okay.
I've got a My last one was a 300 by 300 millimeter. My new one's 420 by 420.
Okay.
So we should be able to fit it, I think.
Well, and you could do it in pieces, right? You could
Yeah, you can, but it's better not to have to glue different pieces together.
Okay.
Better to
And the
print it
other
all
and
in
the
one
other
shot.
and the other thing is too, you could always have a 3D house print it, right?
Send it out
If it
somewhere.
really came, if it really
Yeah.
came down to it.
Yeah.
Although something I think of this size is going to be a little on the pricey side, but hey, it is what it is.
$50 for keycaps, right? To
Well,
me, that's
yeah,
pricey.
yeah.
And
But
so
yeah, I mean, regardless of what David's saying about what our future 2068 feature set would like to be, I still think this 2060 expansion unit would be nice to have just for the current 2068, right? Because then we could put a lot of different things inside the bus expansion unit and still have a place for things to sit on top. Like, if you have a 2040 printer or if you have a 2050 modem, it would look aesthetically nice.
Or a
So
monitor.
it sounds like I need two lists. I need one for the 2060 and then one for the future thing.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Jeff.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll make two lists. And y'all can, talk about like, how do you power it? Is it commercial, off the shelf module or what?
And like I said, I do have some information that I've gotten over the years on the 2060, like internals. Like I said, the power supply and how they were going to have expansion slots. I mean, these are just like drawings. They're not pictures or anything because nobody really knows what was inside. So, and there's also things like on the expansion port, like Enzo was saying, maybe we have like a standard unit and then maybe we have an expanded unit where maybe on the back you have a 2068 expansion port that you could plug things into, and you have a Spectrum port, right? So you have both of them there, so you can plug, peripherals in from both generations of machines, right? And they would still work on the 2068. You wouldn't have to have a twister board that would be built into the expansion unit, right? And then maybe go ahead.
I did some thinking on that, Carl, and I thought I was trying to like come up with some physical layouts, and I was like thinking then I was reminded oh yeah, well, if what you wanted to do was plug in the interface one, remember that thing slides as a wedge under the original Spectrum.
Yes,
so
right.
Okay.
You would
have I don't want to make this too long, but other things like an HDMI output on it, right? So we could kind of integrate maybe David's HDMI board inside of here too, because you're kind of, again, it's to make it go with the existing 2068, but we also want to modernize it. Wouldn't it be great to have an HDMI output right on that expansion bus, or the expansion unit? That way you can plug it into a modern monitor, right?
But the problem is the cost, because if you create a multiple peripheral or dock station, you need to pay, I don't know, maybe $300 for the hardware. And it's expensive if you put all the technology inside. Memory,
well, again, that's what I mean. These would
connecting.
be expansion cards because it's like, David already has that card available. So if it was an expansion,
I can picture it now, a board with a bunch of Picos on it.
Well, I don't know about that because we would obviously want to kind of integrate all that into one, but at least we need to have something, like I said, physically that we can start to think about how we can put things inside of it.
Okay.
And so, but like I said, I do have ideas of, like I said, multiple expansion ports, the video output, and having maybe, like I said, the SD cards in the front of it there, which would be nice for storing and saving programs, things like that. It's still modernizing it. I don't just want a copy of the 2060.
Yep.
That never existed, really. So now here's our chance to kind of create what we think we would like to see inside of that, even though it just uses the 2068 as its computer. But there's all these things that we're developing that plug into it that we could always put inside this expansion unit, either all at once or as expansion cards. You know what I mean? So you can kind of piecemeal what features that you want inside of your bus expansion unit.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you know, the whole kitchen sink. It could be one or two things, but anyway, you would just have some place for all these things to plug into
Mhm.
and have
So-
a nice, convenient output. Anyway,
I'll make 2 lists because clearly we need two survey lists, whatever. Okay, cool. See y'all in 2-ish weeks, whenever, however far off the 6th is.
I think it's 3 weeks, but anyway, that's
Yeah. Okay.
When is the day of starting the Timex, the 40 years? When Timex?
I feel like it was the 17th or something, but I'll see if I can find that hard date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good afternoon,
Bye,
gentlemen.
all.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
all right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Adios.